Hi there, welcome to Boxing Deep Dive. I'm Lyndon Hosking and this is Classic Fights. I'm joined tonight on this episode with Grant Tassie Brown, Peter Matiadis and Mike Altamura. How are we, boys?
All good, guys, all good. How are we?
I think we're raring to go. I think with this fight, you can't help but get pumped by this. Tassie, you're up this week, mate. Now, who you got?
I've got Marco Antonio Barrera versus Erik Morales. Won their first fight. An absolute classic. Two Mexican warriors. Both had bad blood, both from different parts of Mexico. Both literally did not like each other. Morales is undefeated, world champion. Barrera, I think he had something like 40 or something wins before he lost twice, and then he bounced his career back. And two guys in their prime.
Yeah, it certainly was, and Pete, there's two world titles on the line with this one, I think, wasn't there? Both champions at the time.
Yeah. Before we go into it, I want to remember we did the last show on Thursday, and you asked me the question, what was the biggest show I've been to? And Tassie said, did I have a stump of the fight? But I had this. I bought this. Can you see that? Can you see it, Tassie?
That's awesome, Pete.
That is awesome, mate.
I still got it. Now, just a quick question. Do you know who was on the undercard of that fight?
No idea. Pete?
Mike would know.
Mike,
Mike would know. Mike, 97, we're talking top rank.
Of De La Hoya and
Tassie?
Whitaker?
Yep.
Floyd Mayweather.
Floyd was on, yep.
Costa?
Floyd was on. No, not Costa. Mickey Ward was on. The Butterbean was on.
Alfonso Sanchez.
Yeah, Mickey Ward was on. I think Mayweather was probably having his fifth or sixth fight. He was fighting a 6-round fight. He pulverized the guy, dropped him in like pretty quick. It just went one round.
So Mike,
Mike's
sorry.
Mike's had a big day. He's been on the Westgate all day walking, so Mike, if he's not with us tonight, he's very tired.
If the Westgate is my office, get your show.
So Mike, mate, this was one of the fights of the decade. What can you remember about it?
Yeah, well, the whole build-up was bad blood between the two camps from two differing parts of society. So Barrera, for those that don't know, is actually a qualified lawyer. And he was considered to be middle class, privileged somewhat, whereas Morales really comes from the slums of Tijuana. And so there was two contrasting societies, it felt like, battling against each other when these two stepped in the ring. They really didn't like each other. They had a fallout, I believe, at a baseball game a few years before they'd met. So what the debate in regards to that was, who knows? But what really led to clashes throughout time was there was a lot of trash talk going back and forth. There was trainers changing camps. There was people on the same team going, opposing. Each side felt they were selling out intel about one another. And, you know, when you've got two great fighters, both of them believe, especially in the same country, both of them believe that they're the great one in the era or they're the greater one in that era. And so this really built to a crescendo. One of the key victories in Morales' career to this point, and you got to remember, Morales captured the title with the 11th round stoppage of Daniel Zaragoza, Mexican warrior, aging but still a great fighter. And the biggest win really in Morales' career after that was a TKO victory over Junior Jones. Significant because Barrera's two losses were to Junior Jones. And so that started the old boxing dichotomy of, well, fighter A beat fighter B, and fighter C beat fighter A, which means that fighter C is better than fighter B.
Doesn't work that way, does it?
And so Barrera had a lot of pride going into this fight. He started as wide as a 5-1 underdog in the betting, but him and his team felt that they'd fixed a lot of those defensive holes that had been, I suppose, exposed by the likes of Junior Jones. So it was intense, and without spoiling it, boy, did the fight deliver.
And so, Tassie, obviously everyone knows it was a great fight, but what made you have this as your first entry into the Classic Fight series, mate?
I just think, I remember when when it happened, obviously I was in awe of the fight. I mean, I was always more of a Barrera fan than Morales, but I love both. I think they were both striving to be the next Chavez. I mean, Chavez obviously left his mark as probably the greatest Mexican of all time. So I believe Barrera and Morales are both sort of fighting for that position. Yeah, it was just a war, and I remember all three fights I've had very well. I've actually watched them. I think I watched all fights actually live at the time, but I watched Barrera come up through, I think it was Fight Night at the Forum when he was coming up back in the early days of pay TV. And as I said, we really loved Barrera. And then Morales was building up all this momentum and, undefeated. And I remember just a cracking fight. One would win one part of the round. The other one would come back and win the other part of the round. So you're thinking, well, who won that round? I mean, the guy won the first minute. The guy won the last minute. The other guy, and it was just a war, mate. And, yeah, I guess it's just something always, I guess, was perfect to go over tonight. Like, just what a fight.
Well, I won't ask Pete what he thinks because he's just decided to leave the party. But
his buddies are there.
the buddies at the door. But Mike, do you think? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this would probably be the biggest all Mexican fight on American soil, probably since Chavez Ramirez a few years earlier.
Yeah, I would say of the 90s, I mean, all Mexican, correct. If you remember, there was a huge clash between Chiquita Gonzalez and Michael Carbajal.
Oh, yep.
Title. So that was a pretty high level. And then if you're talking about, like I said, guys, Hispanic background, Mexican background, Johnny Tapia and Danny Romero was a massive build. But without question, this was the biggest. And I think because even though the others played to the Mexican audience, say in Carbajal's situation, he was known more as being from Arizona, whereas in terms of like a genuine Mexican firefight, yeah, I'd say that this fight was the biggest to come out of, say, the decade prior and probably the next 5 or 6 years. I know so many battles led out of this one, but this is really the one that set the benchmark.
Yeah, it certainly did, and you're right. They didn't really like each other. Well, just some details around the fight. It took place on February 19th, 2000 at the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. It was for Morales' WBC and Barrera's WBO Super Bantamweight World titles. Morales went in with a 35-0 with 28 KO record, while Barrera had a 49-2 with 36 KO record. So it was all set up for a massive event, and I think all you got to do is probably look at the first round of this to see that both boys meant business, and then of course there was some hell of a rounds in it. So what we'll do, we've got about a 9 or 10 minute highlight package we can all watch here and comment through it, and then at the end of it we'll have a chat about some other facts and figures on it and what our final thoughts were. So let's get into it. Barrera Morales 1. Looks a little bit different these days, doesn't he, Morales? A little bit chunkier.
Yeah, he's old school. He turned pro at 16 years of age.
So they pretty much got straight into it, didn't they? You can see Barrera wanted to really set the pace because I think he was a 6-1 underdog from what I saw, and you wouldn't have thought it though because he fought like he was the favourite, didn't he?
Yeah.
I think Morales was in two minds with the box. Like, you see during a fight, he's kind of turning into the box, but I think he was instinct to fight. I think he was sort of forced to have to box a bit, but his real instinct is to fight,
And Mike, he didn't. Morales doesn't fight like the typical Mexican, does he? I mean, most Mexicans are very controlled, very precise, very. Setting their gears as they go through the fight. But Morales, he fights a lot in spurts and not typically like a Mexican fighter, doesn't he?
He's a bit longer as well.
Yeah, obviously a lot taller.
If you look at Barrera's punching, Barrera's a little bit smoother when he puts his punches together. But Morales is always working. Even if his hands aren't working, his feet are always working. And he's not as flat-footed as a lot of what would be accustomed to seeing a lot of the Mexican fighters. A lot of them are flat-footed, but they'd rather make you miss right in front of them and then try and step and counter. Morales uses his legs a bit more. At least at this stage of his career, he did a bit more so anyways.
I noticed Barrera invested in the body early with this fight.
Yeah.
Maybe because he's been a bit taller and a bit thinner around the waist. Barrera really was invested in the body shots in the first round.
Yeah, and you can see that probably. But Barrera's singular punches are probably a bit harder, but Morales is a bit more fluid when he's putting his shots together, throwing more combinations, at least early in the fight.
There's already been that much action already for this first round, yeah?
Just great fighters, though.
Well, look at their records that you read out, Lyndon. I mean, God.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted watching that, actually.
The late Mitch Halpin's the referee.
Yeah.
I didn't know. He's passed away, has he?
Yeah, he committed suicide.
Oh. It's it's just the difference in styles, isn't it? Though you've got Barrera, who's just that, pick his punches and keep walking forward, and Morales is, looking for the big explosive punches. It was a bloody hard fight to score, really, really hard.
This is the 5th round here, right?
Yeah.
This got voted I think best round
because so much of the action blends into itself. But round 5 of this fight actually won. It was consensus across the industry the round of the year.
Yeah. Look at that, because you thought Barrera was almost gone, and he just comes back. Tough rounds to score.
Morales was starting to get on top of him in that round, and then Barrera just came back with a burst. Both were.
Yeah, I know a lot of people had a 3-3 after 6 rounds.
Yeah, I did.
Up 4-2 after 6.
Yeah, me too. For Barrera, Mike, yeah?
No, Morales up to 6.
I had it 3-3.
Morales up.
Yeah, after 6 rounds.
You're right, though. The action just blends in, doesn't it? It's just like one big action-packed round.
Yeah. You could see that the emotion was getting to both fighters, so that they really disliked each other. And you could just feel that.
So, can I ask, why was Morales such a massive favourite? Because you would have thought, based on the records, was it the fact he was coming up in weight, or because he was 6-1 favourite?
This is a 122, based on Junior Jones. Based on, they figured, you got to remember, Barrera, even though he's only a couple of years older, Barrera turned pro very young, and he peaked very young.
Yeah.
He was ranked top 10 in the world at like age 17. So by the time he got out of the Junior Jones fights, they felt, before Junior Jones, he had one of the best fights of the decade against Kennedy McKinney on the first ever HBO After Dark.
Yeah.
People felt that even though he had put together a bunch of wins post the Junior Jones losses, that he was on the downhill while Erik Morales was just coming into his own. This is before Erik Morales had wars with guys like Kim Jin-Chi and fighters of that ilk, so he was still considered to be very fresh at this stage.
Yeah, it was more of a redemption for Barrera, like Mike said. I think they thought Barrera was past it with those 2 losses. So, I mean, this was to really show that he was still at that level and he was still the man, really.
Isn't it funny, though, that some fighters just have the measure of other fighters, like great fighters, sometimes they have a lesser fighter, just has their measure. It just happens. And Junior Jones obviously had it on Barrera.
Barkley and Hearns.
Yeah. Frankie Randall and Julio Cesar Chavez, gave him fits both times. It's it's just sometimes it happens.
I felt around this stage of the fight, you can see that Barrera's starting to land with a little bit more frequency. Look, felt like in the second half he was starting to work his way inside a bit more. Yeah. Morales still working, but Barrera's work is a lot cleaner.
And if you look at it as well, though, like in all these rounds, like Morales obviously landed some great shots on Barrera, but never really looked like he had him really, really hurt or staggered. Whereas the amount of times that Barrera scored 2, 3, 4, flush punches on Morales and had him rocked, That's what was so hard to score it, because Morales probably landed more, but Barrera definitely landed the cleaner, harder shots, I thought. But he also faded a little bit as well, I think, obviously apart from the last round.
Yeah, I agree. I thought Barrera landed the cleaner shots down the stretch.
You don't see these types of fights anymore, do you? Well, very rarely.
Well, you see 1 or 2 rounds in a 12-rounder like this. You don't see 12 rounds consistently. At this pace and this skill level, they're not just standing and swinging. There's a lot of skill involved in this bout too. Look at them aggressive skills by their bang.
Wow. So much intensity here. Just all.
You can just feel the dislike between them, can't you? We actually saw them at one of those conventions in Vegas where they do the box expo, whatever the hell they are, and they were there. And I think there's still a bit of tension there, to be honest. I think they smiled for the cameras, but yeah, it was through gritted teeth, I think. This must be the last round.
Barrera's down to fight Hoyasi soon.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Is that no Ponce
One of those.
de Leon.
Oh, yeah, Ponce de Leon. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So you can see there, Letterman had Barrera up by 3 points going into this last round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was also a knockdown. It wasn't a knockdown coming up.
Pretty much the last 20 seconds, I think it was.
Yeah, there was a 10-8 round, wasn't there, Mike?
But very
But it
questionable.
wasn't a knockdown. There it goes.
There you are. There's the knockdown.
So this is with, 20-odd seconds to go. If you're Morales, you have to be thinking, I've blown it, wouldn't you? Surely.
But look at the spirit of Morales right here. Look at his mentality.
Yeah. When he's, I'm going to kill now because of that.
Just nuts. The last 10 seconds here. And look at him still going for it.
Bring back 15 rounders.
And no acknowledgement at the end either.
No.
So that was it, 12 rounds. I'm not sure they actually announced the decision here, but... So Morales wins the decision. Well, Mike, let's go to you first. What were your thoughts on it? How'd you have it scored, and what do you think?
Yeah, like I said before, I had Morales up 58-56 after 6 rounds. Then I thought Barrera won 5 of the last 6 rounds, and with the knockdown in the last round, I had him up 115-112. If you wanted to slide one other round Morales' way in that stretch, then 114-113 I thought at best. I thought the last round punctuated the fact that it was Barrera's fight. And, I know 2 of the judges will raise the tide either way, but the one who had it 115-112 for Morales, I got no idea what fight they were watching.
Well, just on the scorecards, you couldn't hear him there in the video, but it was 114-113 for Morales, 115-112 for Morales, and 114-113 for Barrera. So pretty much, the judge that had it for Barrera had it 6 rounds each, and obviously gave the last round 10-8. Morales was obviously in front, had it 1 before the last round anyway. So so the fight itself, Ring Magazine 2000 Fight of the Year. Round 5 was the round of the year. They fought a rematch in 2002, which Barrera won, and then a trilogy fight in November 2004, which Barrera won as well. So Tassie, what were your scorecards?
Yeah, no, I was the same as Mike. I had it for Barrera. I thought he, closed the later rounds, the knockdown in the last round. I definitely thought Barrera won. I did when I first watched it. I've watched it twice since then. Last week was the first time I watched it in years, and I scored each round. I had Barrera. Yeah, bad decision in my opinion.
Yeah. What about you, Pete?
Yeah, I scored it to Barrera as well. I thought he did enough to win. The 12th round was not a knockdown, no. It was just...
but they all scored a knockdown, though.
Yeah, no, the ref called it a knockdown, so the judges had to do that. But if you had to go if you go back to the replays, I saw the replays. There's no gloves landed. He just went onto his hip and he just fell down and, you know, slipped off his hip type of thing. There was no punch landed. So it wasn't a knockdown. But Barrera had already done enough to win the fight. He didn't even need that. So, yeah, I thought it was a real classic fight. It won Fight of the Year, I think, Ring Magazine Fight of the Year. And it was just good to see two gladiators that did not like each other go for it. And the amount of punches they threw and the animosity in there was what it was all about. I'm pretty sure, you know, they would have loved to have fought each other 10 times because they hated each other. Yeah. So it was one of those things. And I saw a pre-fight press conference where Barrera took a shot at Morales and it turned into a bit of a street fight. Luckily, seemed like a pretty quick shot at him too. I'm pretty sure it was Barrera who hit Morales. Is that right, Mike? Or was it Morales who hit Barrera? One of them threw the punch and then the other one threw 2 or 3 punches.
It was Morales threw the first shot from memory.
Okay.
And then Barrera.
Yeah, because it was just dislike. It was just like a street fight in at a press conference. So they didn't like each other.
Remember, after the third fight, Barrera walked across to acknowledge him and Morales threw a water bottle at him.
So even after 3 fights, they still can't shake hands.
No, I reckon they needed to fight each other 10 times or something.
It's a bit like Pacquiao Marquez too, wasn't it? When they fought 4 times. But I actually thought it was a really tough fight to score because you had Barrera who fought the typical Mexican way. They start in first gear and they go to second and third and fourth. There's no sort of going through the backwards in the gears. They always tend to progress through the gears. And whereas Morales seems to be, that's what I commented during the video there, that Morales just doesn't seem to be that normal Mexican fighter where they're always controlled. But I thought that, like you, Mike, after 6 rounds, I think I had it 3-3. After 10 rounds, I had it 5-5. And then after 11 rounds, I think I might have had it 6-5 in favour of Barrera. And then, of course, he put the icing on the cake in the last round. I think that's what it was. But I think overall it was 114, 113 for Barrera. I thought he did enough. And that was probably actually being kind to Morales in a couple of the rounds. I thought that Barrera probably looking at, I think a draw was maybe okay, but there's no way I felt Morales did enough to actually win the fight. So for me, it was Barrera. I thought he fought a really good fight. He probably just faded in a couple of late rounds that maybe might have given Morales a bit of a look in, but I just thought that knockdown in the end really, even though it wasn't a knockdown, Pete, I agree with you, it definitely wasn't a knockdown. The fact that it was scored a knockdown, it's a 10-8 round, and I thought that that definitely put Barrera over the line.
Yeah.
So as I said, they fought 2 more times, and I think, was it the second fight or third fight that actually a little bit of the reverse happened, Mike? You can correct me here. So Barrera got the decision, but Morales was probably thought to be unlucky.
Yeah, if ever there was poetic justice in boxing to balance out 2 fighters, that was it. And then the third fight was tied as well, but it rightfully went finally out of 3 fights. 1 decision went the way that it should have, but it was even. It balanced out in the end.
Yeah, it was.
My brother Nadal was put on the undercard of the third fight against Ostalarios for the world title.
Is that right? Didn't know that.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Well, obviously after that, there was obviously fights with Prince Nassim and Robbie Peden and Manny Pacquiao and all that. I suppose intertwined with all those opponents as well. So I think that was a great trilogy, and it probably really was a shame they didn't fight for a 4th time, because it's like Pacquiao Marquez. They probably could have kept going on, and like you said, Pete could have fought 10 times, and we probably still wouldn't have a definitive result.
Yeah, it would have. But 3 times is still enough. 3 times is still enough. They did it, and I'm sure it would have shortened both their careers.
No, definitely. Well,
100%.
Yeah, it was great, mate. Good, very, very good choice there. So, Mike, that means you're up next week, mate. Who have you got anyone in mind that you're thinking of at this stage?
Yes, I've been wrestling over 2 fights. I'm going to go with one, and then I'm going to come back to the other one later. So I think that we're all Australians. We're producing a show that's produced in Australia, yet we haven't featured any Australians in the series yet. So
let me guess, Barry Michael Lester Ellis.
Not that Australian just yet. Not that one just yet. I thought that internationally, there was two I've been weighing up, and I'm going to actually go with the first one because I think it gets given less attention than it deserves, and that's Terry Norris versus Troy Waters.
Oh, great fight.
I think that's a great fight to look back on. And the other one that I want to get to eventually is Dennis Andres and Jeff Hardy.
I was just going to say that. That's what I thought you'd go for.
Yeah.
I think that's been talked about so much more, and people forget what an effort Troy Waters raised against the number one pound-for-pound fighter in that stage.
Well, I'm glad because we can actually watch that fight in its entirety. I think it only went 3 rounds. So, it's a great one, mate. And I suppose you could throw in
I thought
Fennec
you were
and
going to
Nelson.
do Harry Grant versus Gene Tunney.
What about your dream fight, Mike? We need your dream fight.
Oh, we'll do that for the next episode. Yep, we'll announce that in the next one. But no, that's awesome. So we look forward to Terry Norris, Troy Waters. I think it was a 1993 fight from memory for the WBC Super Welterweight title. And if you haven't seen that fight, make sure you tune in because it was you thought Hagler Hearns was pretty brutal. Wait till you see this one. So all good, mate. Well, we look forward to that. Thanks, guys. That was Erik Morales, Marco Antonio Barrera, number 1. Thanks, Tassie. Great choice, mate. And tune in next week.
Thanks.
See you, boys.